Not you too, Thelma. A man does what he thinks is right and the whole world comes down on him. I mean, as head of the house, if I make a decision, I gotta stick with it.
Ever wonder what really happened behind the scenes of America's first black two-parent sitcom? From actors who barely spoke off camera to a catchphrase the director invented against the star's wishes, Good Times was anything but simple family fun. The show that made Dy-no-mite a household word hid bitter feuds, a homeless creator, and casting secrets that would shock fans today. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Good Times. Fact 1. Jimmy Walker never spoke to his TV parents. Off script.
Teen today, happy, bright, narrow man and pure Dy-no-mite!
For 6 seasons on Good Times, Jimmy Walker played J.J. Evans, the wisecracking eldest son of James and Florida Evans. But behind the scenes, the family dynamic couldn't have been more different from what viewers saw on their television screens. In a revealing interview with Emmy TV legends, Walker made a stunning admission about his relationship with his on-screen parents, John Amos and Esther Roll, stating that during the entire production run from 1974 to 1979, he genuinely could not remember saying a single word to either of them that wasn't written in the script. This wasn't just a case of actors keeping to themselves between takes or maintaining professional boundaries, but rather a reflection of the deep tension that existed on the Good Times set, particularly surrounding Walker's character and the direction the show had taken. While the Evans family appeared warm and loving on camera, with tight-knit bonds and genuine affection flowing between parents and children, the reality was that Amos and Rolla had grown increasingly frustrated with the show's focus on JJ's buffoonish antics and catchphrases, believing the character reinforced negative stereotypes about young black men rather than providing the positive representation they had hoped to bring to television. Walker, for his part, found himself caught in the middle of this creative conflict, becoming the breakout star of the series, while simultaneously becoming a source of resentment for his co-stars who felt the show's original mission of portraying a dignified, struggling black family was being undermined. The lack of off-screen communication between Walker and the actors playing his parents speaks volumes about just how divided the cast had become over the show's direction, with the older actors believing strongly in one vision for Good Times, while Walker rode the wave of his character's popularity with audiences who couldn't get enough of his Dy-no-mite catchphrase and physical comedy. Fact 2. JJ was only 7.5 years younger than his dad.
Dad, I know you're the head of the family, and I know I went against you, and I know what you might do.
When Good Times premiered in 1974, viewers watching the Evans family navigate life in the Chicago projects had no idea just how close in age the cast members actually were, and nowhere was this more apparent than with the show's patriarch and his oldest son, Jimmy Walker, who played the lanky, loud-mouthed J.J. Evans was 26 years old when the series began filming in January of 1974, which might seem reasonable for playing an 18-year-old character until you realize that John Amos, cast as his father, James Evans Sr., was only 34 at the time. That meant the actor playing the teenage son was just 7.5 years younger than the man supposed to be his middle-aged father, creating one of the most unusual age gaps in television sitcom history. The casting choice becomes even stranger when you consider that James Evans was written as a hard-working father figure who had been married for years and struggled through decades of blue-collar jobs to support his family, while JJ was portrayed as a goofy, immature teenager still living at home and getting into trouble with his schemes and antics. John Amos brought a weathered, authoritative presence to the role that made him seem much older than his actual age, which helped sell the dynamic on screen, but behind the scenes, the reality was impossible to ignore. Adding to the weirdness, Esther Roll, who played Florida Evans and was supposed to be close in age to her husband James, was actually 19 years older than John Amos, making her 53 when the show started, while Amos was still in his mid-30s. This meant that the television son was closer in age to his television father than the father was to his own television wife, creating a bizarre triangle of ages that somehow worked perfectly on camera despite defying all logic behind it. The casting department clearly prioritized finding actors who could embody the characters rather than worrying about realistic age differences. And the chemistry between the performers proved them right, even if the math told a very different story. Fact 3. The director invented Dy-no-mite against Walker's will.
It's my husband! You mean like an Ernie-type husband?
One of the most iconic catchphrases in television history almost never happened because the person who had to say it thought it was ridiculous. Jimmy Walker didn't come up with Dy-no-mite himself, and he definitely didn't want to say it on camera. The whole thing was the brainchild of director John Rich, who heard Walker casually say the phrase during a rehearsal and immediately recognized its potential. Rich pulled Walker aside and told him he had to work it into the show, going so far as to coach him on exactly how to deliver it with maximum impact. He instructed Walker to really commit to the performance, telling him to put his teeth out there and make it big with his eyes and his whole face, turning it into a full physical moment rather than just a throwaway line. Walker was completely skeptical about the entire idea and told Rich point blank that audiences would never be stupid enough to fall for something so over the top and theatrical. He genuinely believed the catchphrase would fall flat and make him look foolish on national television. But Rich had confidence in the bit and insisted they try it anyway, eventually convincing Walker to give it a shot despite his serious reservations about how it would play with viewers at home. The reaction from producer Norman Lear was even worse than Walker's hesitation. Lear absolutely hated the catchphrase from the moment he heard it, openly declaring that he didn't understand what it meant, didn't know what it was about, and thought it was the stupidest thing he had ever seen in his entire career in television. Lear wanted to limit its use or possibly eliminate it altogether, suggesting they only include it once every other episode if they had to use it at all. But John Rich fought hard to keep it in the show, arguing that the audience response proved it was working and that it deserved to be featured at least once in every single episode. The compromise they reached allowed Dy-no-mite to appear once per show, and of course, Rich turned out to be absolutely right about its appeal. The catchphrase became a cultural phenomenon that defined the 1970s, and Walker himself later acknowledged that when he dies, newscasters will remember him as the guy who said Dy-no-mite more than anything else he ever accomplished in his long career. Fact 4. The show's creator sued for $185 million and ended up homeless.
Let's don't jump to any conclusions. I was a little bit worried too, but JJ has passed before and he probably will pass again.
The man who created Good Times and brought the Evans family to life had a story that turned out far darker than anything depicted on the show. Eric Monte, born Kenneth Williams in 1943, grew up in Chicago's Cabrini Green housing projects, the same high-rise complex that would later appear in the opening credits of Good Times. Monte dropped out of Cooley Vocational High School during his junior year, enlisted in the Army, and after his service ended, he hitchhiked all the way to Hollywood with dreams of becoming a screenwriter. His big break came 5 years later when he wrote a script for All in the Family that got accepted, which eventually led him to co-create Good Times with actor Mike Evans in 1974, basing the show on his own experiences growing up poor in Chicago. But by 1977, Monte was convinced that Norman Lear and the television networks had been stealing his creative work without proper compensation or credit. He filed a massive lawsuit for $185 million against ABC, CBS, Tandem Productions, and producers Norman Lear and Bud Yorkin, claiming they had taken his ideas to create not just Good Times, but also The Jeffersons and What's Happening. The lawsuit clearly had merit because Monte eventually received a settlement of $1 million and a small percentage of residuals from Good Times, along with 1% ownership of the show. However, the victory came at a devastating cost. Monte later claimed that after he filed the lawsuit, every single offer from Hollywood dried up overnight, and he was effectively blacklisted from the industry. Without any work coming in, Monty's life spiraled downward. He lost his million-dollar settlement through poor investments and lack of business knowledge, developed an addiction to crack cocaine, and by 2006 was living in a Salvation Army homeless shelter in Bell, California. During an NPR interview that same year, when Norman Lear was asked to respond to details of the court settlement, he refused to comment. Monty remained in the shelter, staying sober due to mandatory drug testing, and continued writing television and film scripts, still hoping for another chance at a comeback. Fact 5. Esther Roll forced producers to add a husband.
You know, when your father and I got engaged, I yelled it loud and clear, and I've been yelling it ever since.
When Norman Lear first approached Esther Roll about starring in her own spin-off for Maude, the original concept for Good Times looked very different from what eventually made it to television. The show was initially designed to feature Florida Evans as a single mother raising her children alone in the Chicago housing projects, which was a common setup for sitcoms at the time and seemed like a natural extension of her character from Maude, where she worked as a housekeeper. However, Roll immediately pushed back against this idea with surprising force, and her insistence on one crucial element completely changed the direction of the entire series. Roll told the producers in no uncertain terms that she would not accept the role unless Florida had a husband present in the home, and she wasn't willing to negotiate on this point at all. Her reasoning was both personal and political, as she believed that showing yet another black family without a father figure would reinforce harmful stereotypes that were already too prevalent on television and in American culture at large. At a time when very few shows featured black families in any context, Rolla understood that Good Times would carry significant weight in how millions of viewers perceived African American family life, and she refused to contribute to a narrative that suggested black fathers were absent or uninvolved. The producers initially resisted her demands because the single mother storyline seemed easier to write and had worked successfully in other shows, but Rolla stood firm and made it clear she would walk away from the opportunity entirely if they didn't meet her requirements. After much discussion and debate, Norman Lear and his team finally agreed to her terms, which led to the creation of the James Evans character and the casting of John Amos in the role. This decision proved to be transformative, as Good Times became television's first African-American two-parent family sitcom, breaking new ground in representation and showing a strong, loving marriage at the center of a show about economic struggle and resilience in 1974. Fact 6. John Amos threatened writers over jokes.
Put him in a ditch 20 by 30 feet, there ain't no way in the world he could dig himself out.
John Amos didn't just disagree with the writers of Good Times, he got into confrontations so intense that he openly admits he would challenge them to physical fights. The actor who played patriarch James Evans felt that the show's predominantly white writing staff didn't understand how a black father would actually speak or behave, and he wasn't afraid to tell them so in the most direct way possible. In interviews given years after the show ended, Amos explained that his approach to giving feedback wasn't exactly diplomatic. When he saw dialogue or situations in the scripts that he felt were completely out of touch with authentic black family life, he would confront the writers and say things like, "Let's go outside," essentially challenging them to settle their creative differences with their fists. As Amos himself admitted in a 2014 interview with the Television Academy Foundation, he wasn't very tactful in his complaints about the scripts, and these were Hollywood writers who simply weren't used to that kind of aggressive pushback. The tension got so bad that Norman Lear, the show's executive producer, eventually decided that Amos had to go. After 3 seasons, Lear called Amos and told him that his contract option wasn't being renewed, which Amos later said was the same thing as being fired. The official reason given was that Amos had become a disruptive element on set, and according to Amos's own words, the writers had grown tired of having their lives threatened over jokes they were writing for a sitcom. What makes this situation particularly interesting is that Amos genuinely believed he was fighting for something important: accurate representation of black families on television at a time when there were very few examples to begin with. He felt that his real-life experience as a black man gave him insights the writers simply didn't have, and he wasn't willing to compromise on that, even if it cost him his job. The writers and producers, meanwhile, saw his behavior as impossible to work with, leading to one of the most dramatic behind-the-scenes conflicts in 1970s television. Fact 7. The theme song lyrics are famously indecipherable.
You don't sound selfish. You sound more like a leech.
If you grew up watching Good Times, you probably sang along to that catchy gospel-style theme song without having any idea what the actual words were. The opening credits featured one of the most misheard lyrics in television history, and even the people making the DVDs couldn't figure out what was being sung. The line in question comes right after the singers belt out "Scratchin' and Survivin'" and easy credit ripoffs, and it sounds like they're singing "Hangin' in a Chow Line," which would make sense given that the show was about a family struggling with poverty in the Chicago projects. For decades, fans debated what the real lyrics were, with most people convinced they were hearing references to waiting in line for food. The confusion became so widespread that comedian Dave Chappelle made it part of his famous I Know Black People game show skit on Chappelle's Show, where he used the lyric as a quiz question and claimed the answer was "hangin' in a chow line." The problem got even worse when the Season 1 DVD box set was released, because whoever wrote the closed captions apparently couldn't figure it out either, and went with "hangin' in a chow line" in the official subtitles. But the songwriters themselves, the legendary Oscar-winning duo Alan and Marilyn Bergman, eventually came forward to set the record straight, confirming that the actual lyric is "hangin' in and jivin'," which refers to the family just hanging in there and keeping a positive attitude despite their struggles. The confusion wasn't entirely the fault of viewers who couldn't understand the words, because the way the song was recorded made it nearly impossible to hear clearly. The theme was performed by singers Jim Gilstrap and Blinky Williams, with a full gospel choir providing background vocals, and the audio mixing combined with their singing style created a wall of sound that buried the individual words. Bernadette Stanis, who played Thelma on the show, later confirmed the correct lyric along with the Bergmans. But by that point, millions of people had already spent years singing the wrong words, and the debate continues to this day on social media whenever someone brings up the show. Fact 8. Janet Jackson's first role was as an abused child.
What happened? I fell. I always fall. My feet are all thumbs.
When Janet Jackson joined Good Times in 1977 for the show's 5th season, she was only 10 years old and had never acted professionally before. The role that would become her television debut wasn't your typical child actor part on a sitcom. Instead, the youngest member of the famous Jackson family was cast as Penny Gordon, a quiet and withdrawn girl who lived in the same building as the Evans family and who was being physically abused by her own mother. The storyline unfolded over a 4-part season premiere called The Evans Get Involved, and it didn't hold back on showing the dark reality of child abuse. Penny's mother, played by Chip Fields, was portrayed as an angry single parent who took out her frustrations on her daughter by burning her with a hot iron, leaving visible scars and bruises on the child's body. The images of Penny's injuries and her fear of going home were shocking for audiences in the late 1970s, when most sitcoms avoided such heavy subject matter entirely. Janet Jackson's performance was remarkably mature and emotionally powerful for someone so young. She convincingly portrayed a child who had learned to lie and make up stories as a defense mechanism to hide the abuse happening at home. One memorable scene showed Willona Woods discovering the truth when she saw the burn marks and bruises covering Penny's back, leading to a heartbreaking moment where the terrified little girl tried to explain away her injuries by claiming she was clumsy and always falling down. The storyline was groundbreaking for television at the time because it didn't just mention child abuse in passing, but made it a central focus across multiple episodes, showing the process of intervention, investigation, and eventually Willona's decision to adopt Penny after her mother abandoned her. The role allowed Janet Jackson to demonstrate serious acting ability beyond her famous last name, and the character of Penny became a regular part of the show through its final season. Many viewers who watched those episodes as children have said they still remember the disturbing iron-burning scenes decades later, proving just how impactful and difficult to watch this storyline truly was. Fact 9. The show filmed in Hollywood, not Chicago.
On my date.
Why were you running?
If you saw the way Henrietta's built, you know why.
If you watched Good Times and felt like you were right there in the Chicago projects with the Evans family, you weren't alone, but you also weren't actually seeing Chicago. Despite the show being firmly set in the notorious Cabrini Green housing projects on Chicago's near North Side, nearly everything you saw on screen was filmed over 2,000 miles away in Hollywood, California. All of the interior scenes, including the iconic Evans family apartment on the 17th floor, were shot on soundstages at Metro Media Square in Hollywood, which is now part of the larger studio complex in Los Angeles. The decision to film in California rather than on location in Chicago was purely practical, as filming sitcoms on location was incredibly expensive during the 1970s, and the multi-camera format with a live studio audience required the controlled environment that only a soundstage could provide. The only actual footage of Chicago that made it into the show appeared in the opening and closing credits, where viewers saw real exterior shots of the Cabrini Green housing projects, specifically buildings located at 900 North Hudson Avenue and the surrounding areas. These brief glimpses of the towering high-rise buildings and the urban landscape were enough to establish the setting, but once the show transitioned inside the Evans apartment or showed the hallways and surrounding areas, everything was meticulously recreated in Hollywood. The production designers did such a convincing job recreating the look and feel of Chicago public housing that most viewers never questioned whether they were actually seeing the real thing. The apartment set, with its worn furniture, tight quarters, and authentic details, perfectly captured the reality of project living that creator Eric Monte knew firsthand from growing up in Cabrini Green himself. This contrast between the Hollywood-built sets and the real Chicago location footage created a television magic that made audiences believe they were witnessing authentic Chicago life, even though the actors never set foot in the actual projects during regular filming. Fact 10. Esther Roll was 19 years older than her husband.
You're not old enough to move out on your own.
Mama, I'm 17 years old.
That's too young.
When Good Times premiered in February 1974, viewers saw what appeared to be a married couple in their middle years, struggling to raise 3 kids in the Chicago projects. But behind the scenes, there was something unusual about the casting that most people never noticed. John Amos, who played the hard-working father, James Evans, was only 34 years old when filming began, while Esther Rolle, who portrayed his wife Florida, was 53. That meant there was actually a 19-year age difference between the two actors, even though their characters were supposed to be close in age, with some episodes even suggesting that James was older than Florida. This kind of age gap wasn't completely unheard of in Hollywood, where older actresses were often paired with younger leading men, but it was definitely unusual to see it happen in reverse, especially on a show that prided itself on realistic portrayals of African American family life. What made it work was the incredible chemistry between Amos and Rolla, along with their powerful performances that made audiences completely believe they were a couple who had been together for years. Roll brought such warmth and maternal wisdom to the role of Florida that her real age simply didn't matter to viewers watching at home. The age difference also meant that Roll was dealing with very different life experiences than her on-screen children, which in some ways may have helped her portray a mother figure with such authentic concern and protectiveness. Meanwhile, Amos, who was still relatively young himself and only 7.5 years older than Jimmy Walker, who played his oldest son, had to project the weariness and determination of a man who had been ground down by years of economic struggle and dead-end jobs. Despite the unusual casting choice, both actors made their roles completely believable, proving that great acting and strong writing could overcome any technical inconsistencies in age. The show's producers clearly knew what they were doing when they cast these two talented performers together. Fact 11. The character names changed from the spin-off.
If you really think you're gonna die, why did you pick our apartment?
When Good Times premiered in February 1974, most viewers had no idea that the Evans family had actually appeared on television before and under very different circumstances. The character of Florida Evans first showed up on the hit sitcom Maude, where she worked as the housekeeper for the title character played by B. Arthur. But when producers decided to give Florida her own spin-off show, they completely rewrote her family's backstory in ways that dramatically changed who these characters were supposed to be. On Maude, Florida's husband was named Henry Evans, not James, and he had a respectable middle-class job working as a firefighter in New York City. The couple lived in Tuckahoe, New York, which is a suburban community in Westchester County, and their life seemed relatively stable compared to what viewers would later see on Good Times. But when Norman Lear and the creators developed the new show, they made the deliberate choice to transform the Evans family from a working middle-class household into a family struggling with poverty in the Chicago housing projects. The husband's name changed from Henry to James Evans, and instead of being a firefighter with steady employment, James became a man with only a 6th grade education who was constantly bouncing between odd jobs and facing unemployment. The family's entire location shifted from suburban New York to apartment 17C at 963 North Gilbert Avenue in a Chicago public housing project, and Florida went from being employed as a housekeeper to focusing on raising her 3 children while dealing with the daily struggles of life in the projects. This wasn't just a minor adjustment to make the spin-off work. It was a complete overhaul of the family's economic status, education level, and living situation. The show never referenced Maude or acknowledged Florida's previous life as a housekeeper, and in one episode titled The Checkup, Florida only briefly mentions having formerly worked as a maid without any specific details. The transformation was so thorough that the Evans family on Good Times became an entirely different household from the one that had appeared on Maude, allowing the new show to tackle issues of poverty, racism, and economic hardship in ways that wouldn't have been possible with the original middle-class version of the characters. Fact 12. The show was the top 7 rated program. Its first full season.
Keep lying there, and you're gonna be laying in your right position for your funeral.
When Good Times premiered in February of 1974 as a mid-season replacement, nobody could have predicted just how massive it would become. But by the time the show completed its first full season on the air, it had climbed to become the 7th highest rated program in all of American television according to the Nielsen ratings. To put that achievement in perspective, more than 25% of all American households were tuning in to watch the Evans family each week, which means that 1 out of every 4 homes in the entire country was watching this groundbreaking sitcom about a family struggling to make ends meet in the Chicago housing projects. What makes this success even more remarkable is that Good Times wasn't alone in dominating the airwaves during that incredible season, because 3 of the top 10 highest-rated programs on American television that year centered on the lives of African-American families, with Sanford and Son and the Jeffersons joining Good Times in the upper echelon of viewership. This represented a seismic shift in what American audiences wanted to see on their television screens. And it proved that shows featuring black families dealing with real issues could not only survive, but absolutely thrive in prime time. The show's initial premiere in February had already performed well enough that CBS renewed it for the 1974-75 season, where it ranked as the 17th highest-rated program. But once it had a full season to build momentum and audience loyalty, Good Times exploded into the top 10. This wasn't just a cultural phenomenon within black communities, though the show certainly resonated deeply there, but rather it became appointment television for viewers of all backgrounds who connected with the Evans family's struggles, humor, and unwavering love for one another, despite the challenges they faced every single day in their lives. Fact 13. Oscar winners wrote the theme song.
I don't need no help in that department. I'm already a wreck. Oh, Mama!
When you hear those opening notes of the Good Times theme song, you're actually listening to the work of some of Hollywood's most celebrated songwriters, even if you didn't realize it at the time. The lyrics were written by the husband and wife team of Alan and Marilyn Bergman, who were already legends in the music industry by the time Good Times premiered in 1974. The Bergmans had an incredible track record that included writing the lyrics for The Way We Were, which won them an Academy Award for Best Original Song in 1974, the same year Good Times first aired on television. Over their long careers together, the Bergmans would collect 3 Oscars, 4 Emmy Awards, and 2 Grammy Awards, eventually earning induction into the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 1980. The music itself was composed by Dave Grusin, another powerhouse in the industry, who would go on to win his own Oscar and multiple Grammys for his film composition work. Together, they created a gospel-styled theme that perfectly captured both the struggles and the resilience of the Evans family, with lyrics that mentioned temporary layoffs and easy credit rip-offs while still celebrating the good times in life. The song was performed by studio musicians Jim Gilstrap and Blinky Williams, with a full gospel choir providing background vocals that gave the theme its distinctive sound. What makes this collaboration even more remarkable is how the Bergmans, who came from very different backgrounds than the characters on Good Times, were able to write lyrics that authentically captured the daily reality of a working-class black family living in the Chicago projects. They penned lines about keeping your head above water and making a wave when you can, phrases that resonated deeply with viewers who understood what it meant to scratch and survive while still finding moments of joy. The theme song became so iconic that it's ranked among TV Land's 100 Greatest TV Quotes and remains instantly recognizable decades after the show ended its run in 1979. Fact 14. John Amos returned in 2019, playing a different character.
Or their idea of what a black family would be and what a black father would be was totally different from mine.
In December of 2019, something remarkable happened that brought Good Times back into the spotlight in a way nobody expected. A BC aired a special live event called Live in Front of a Studio Audience, where famous actors recreated classic episodes from Norman Lear's groundbreaking shows. And John Amos made a surprising return to the Good Times universe, but not in the way fans might have imagined. Instead of reprising his iconic role as James Evans, the father he'd played for 3 seasons before being fired back in 1976, Amos appeared in a completely different part. He took on the character of Alderman Fred Davis, a local politician running for re-election in the episode they were recreating. The role put him in scenes alongside the new actors playing the Evans family, including Viola Davis as Florida, Andre Braugher as James, and Jay Faroa as JJ, creating a strange but meaningful full-circle moment for the 79-year-old actor. What made this appearance so significant was the journey Amos and Norman Lear had taken to get there. After Amos was let go from Good Times, following heated arguments with writers and producers about how black characters were being portrayed, the 2 men hadn't worked together for decades. The wounds from that time ran deep, with Amos openly discussing his frustrations about the show's direction and his unceremonious dismissal. But by 2019, time had healed those old conflicts. Amos described the experience of returning to work with Lear as wonderful and admitted he shed tears during the taping because all the wounds had been healed. He told reporters that despite their differences, they had gotten back together again and learned to respect each other. The special also featured appearances by surviving original cast members Bernadette Stanis, Jeanette Dubois, and Jimmy Walker, though they didn't have speaking roles. For Amos, the moment represented not just a professional reunion, but a personal reconciliation with a chapter of his life that had ended so abruptly and painfully more than 40 years earlier. Fact 15. Networks repeatedly demanded they remove the father.
Got engaged. You weren't exactly crazy about Larry.
Well, that was before I found out he could get tickets to the Bulls games.
According to creator Eric Monti, the network executives at CBS had a persistent and troubling demand that came up after nearly every episode during the show's production. Monti revealed in a 2006 interview with NPR that the network notes would consistently contain the same request: get rid of the father. The executives believed that a strong black male character did not work in a sitcom, and they pressured the production team to remove James Evans from the show entirely. This revelation sheds new light on why Good Times was so revolutionary when it premiered in 1974 as television's first African-American two-parent family sitcom. The network's resistance to keeping James Evans on the show wasn't just about creative differences or ratings, but reflected a deeply ingrained belief in the television industry that audiences wouldn't accept or relate to a positive portrayal of a black father. Monti, who grew up in Chicago's Cabrini Green housing projects and based the show on his own experiences, fought against these network demands because he understood the importance of showing an intact black family struggling with dignity against economic hardship. The irony is that when John Amos was eventually fired after the third season due to his conflicts with the writers, and his character James Evans was killed off in a car accident, the network finally got what they had been asking for all along. However, the show suffered significantly from his departure. CBS executive Steve Mills later admitted that without the parental guidance James provided, the show lost its essence and ratings declined considerably. The network received feedback through mail, phone calls, and research indicating that viewers wanted the father figure back, which eventually led to Esther Roll returning for the final season after her own departure. Monti's revelation about the network's repeated demands exposes the uphill battle that Good Times faced simply to present a normalized portrayal of black family life, making its 6-year run even more significant in television history.